Hi friends, today's video we are going to be talking about misconceptions that are floating around in the reselling community. If you're new to the community or you're just starting out or you've been in it for a while, you have probably heard the term sell-through rate kind of thrown out there. In today's video, I am going to be walking you through exactly what sell-through rate is, why we use it in the reselling and honestly in retail community altogether, why you use that as opposed to some other metrics to look at and compare to. And then I'm going to be talking about 4 misconceptions that I hear fairly regularly, and I'm hoping that you guys don't do these, and if you do, now you know what the proper way to do it is. So first, let's get into sell-through rate. What exactly is sell-through rate? I'm going to share this formula with you. I know it's math, but I'm going to walk you through it. I'm going to also walk you through exactly how to calculate it for yourself. If you're new to the channel or you're not new to the channel, you know that I have tons of tools to help you figure out your sell-through rate and help you use your sell-through rate to make decisions about your business. This is very basic to help you figure out just a very basic sell-through rate, what it is, and then we're going to talk about why we even look at it and why we use it. So sell-through rate is how many items you've sold out of how many items that you've had for sale. So you take your items sold and then you divide that by how many items that were for sale during the time period. Now that means that you divide it by the items that sold were available during that time period, right? You can do it for a month, you can do it for a year, whatever it is, do it for the same time period for all variables, but the items that sold need to be in the top, so in the numerator, and in the denominator, the bottom, what you're dividing by, because they sold, but they were available items during this time period that you're looking at, and then you add that to the items that were available, and that's going to give you your sell-through rate. So let's go through and do an example of how to do this, and then I'm going to walk you through exactly why we use this and why it even matters. Doing this math, is it really necessary? I'm going to tell you it is, and tell you some reasons why, and then 4 misconceptions that I hear in the community in using this. So what we're going to do, I have variables on the side. You can write this down and do the calculator on your phone. You could do it in a spreadsheet, whatever you're comfortable with. It's just easy for me to show it to you in a spreadsheet. So you have your items sold and your items available. You just need to know those 2 numbers for the sake of easy math and for some examples. We're just going to say, hey, I sold 100 items and I had 100 items available, right? So if I were to go look at my eBay active listings right now, it says that I have 100 items available. But remember, during this time period, those 100 items that sold were available and now they've moved to my sold. So to get my sell-through rate, some would say, hey, 100 items divided by 100 items, right? Like it's 100% sell-through rate. Wrong. So what we're looking at, and I'm going to click on this, you can see up here in the formula bar, I'm taking B4, right? So this is going to be my items sold divided by the 2 together. So it's actually 100 divided by 200, which gives me a percentage, and that gives me a 50% sell-through rate, right? So let's do one more example. Now that the formula is there, I can change these numbers and say, hey, I sold 50. That's going to decrease my sell-through rate to 33%. Let's say I sold 400. Oh, wait, escape, right? So you can go in and mess with these numbers. If you have some of my other spreadsheets, you know that I have lots of spreadsheets that have these items available. So why is your sell-through, now that you know how to calculate it, why is this important? There's a couple reasons. One is going to put a percentage, a rate around how many items that you're selling, right? So instead of just going in, let's look at the example. So instead of just going in and saying, hey, and this you can look at for categories, you can look at it for platforms, you can look at it for all of your inventory, putting a rate and a number into different variables that you want to look at allow you to make strategic decisions about your business because you're able to compare them. You're able to look at the health of different things within your business. You can make strategic decisions and start buying smarter and start making better decisions once you know what your sell-through rate is and you can compare objectively, right? If you go into eBay Terapeak, they're going to say, hey, women's shoes have a sell-through rate of 10%. If you calculate your women's shoes and you say, hey, I have a sell-through rate of 3% on my shoes, now I know there's things that I need to be doing because eBay shoes are selling at a 10% rate and mine are not. If you're strictly looking at, I sold 25 pairs of shoes last month, eBay says their sell-through rate is 25%, that there's no way for you to compare your business to what's happening in the market on eBay. The same goes for yourself. So if you're comparing to yourself and saying, hey, I sold 25 shoes this month and I sold 50 pairs of shoes last month. Well, I sold more shoes last month. Well, did you have more available last month, right? Like putting a rate to it allows you to objectively look at these different things, look at categories, at brands, at platforms, at all of these different things in your business that allows you to look at from an objective standpoint. So let's look at this as an example, right? So let's say you sold 50 items and you're like, cool, I crushed it last month. And then you go into, I'm going to put it over here. And then you go into this month and you say, okay, I sold 50 items, or I'll say this is last month and this is current, and that makes more sense. This is current. So you would say here, hey, last month I sold 50, this month I sold 25. What is the problem? I'm selling less items. And if you strictly look at the quantity sold, that's what you're going to say. But if you compare it to the items that you had available, I'm just going to do a quick copy and paste here so we have it. So if you compare it to the items available, yes, if you have the same items available, let's say last month you had 100 items available, this month you had 100 items available, yes, your sell-through rate is going down. But let's say, hey, you are just like listing, and now you have 100, and let's say you have 300 items available, and you're still only selling 25 shoes. Your sell-through rate is down. But let's say you are not listing at all, right? And you sold the 50 pairs of shoes, you had 100 available, now you're down to 50. Your sell-through rate is the same. Even though you're only selling 25 shoes, last month you sold 50 shoes, you're selling 25 shoes now, it's because you have less shoes available, right? And so this is why looking at it from a rate perspective, instead of just looking at the quantity sold, is going to help you make strategic decisions about your business. A couple things I'm going to say to be mindful of when you're looking at sell-through rate, and then I'm going to get into the 4 misconceptions that I want you guys to be mindful to not be doing this when you are looking at sell-through rates. So your sell-through rate, you can look at it for various different ways. You can look at it for a day. You can look at it for a month. You can look at it for a year. You can look at whatever it is. The one thing you want to make sure when you're doing it is that these variables, your items sold and your items available, your active listings available, are for the same time period, right? And then if you do cross list, you want to be mindful that it's all of your items available. So if you cross list on Poshmark and eBay and you have the same items available, right? Everything on eBay is everything on Poshmark. Those are your items available. If you have some items on Poshmark and some items on eBay and you want to look at your business as a whole, you still do all of the items that are available for somebody to purchase. So if you have every single item in your inventory on eBay and you only have a couple on Poshmark, the bigger number, because they're the items that someone could purchase, that's the number that you are going to take. Now, if you wanted to look at your sell-through rate and look at eBay versus Poshmark, you would have 2 different denominators because Poshmark has less items available. Let me show you this in an example, because this is another reason that we look at sell-through rate, and then we'll get into it. So let's say this is Poshmark, and let's say this is eBay, right? So this is another reason that we can look at it. So saying, hey, on Poshmark I sold 50, on eBay I only sold 25. On Poshmark I sold 50, eBay I sold 25. I'm trying to quickly think of the math I want to do to show you the example. So Poshmark I sold 50, eBay I sold 25. If we are strictly looking at how many items you sold, you would say, hey, Poshmark is crushing it. They are where it's at, and I need to be selling more on Poshmark because I'm actually selling more on Poshmark. But like I said earlier, let's say that you had more items available on eBay. So let's say you had 50 items available on eBay. let's say you had 50 items available on 500 items available on eBay and you sold 50 on Poshmark, but you only had 100 available on Poshmark. Your rate, your sell-through rate on Poshmark is absolutely telling you that items are selling much better on Poshmark. Now, if we did a vice versa of this and said, hey, you are crushing it on eBay, you sold 50 items on both platforms, Poshmark is still better. But let's say you sold 200 items on eBay, right? And you can see how these are moving to where you can start to compare the difference between the two. 400 on eBay, right? Like you can start to look and compare these objectively and not just by the total items that sold. So let's get into a couple of the misconceptions that I hear in the community to kind of just debunk some of these things and make sure that you guys aren't doing them as well. So the first thing that I hear is that you divide by the active listings, and this is wrong, right? We talked about it a little bit, so you guys should be able to let me know down below. Did you get this answer right? Why this is wrong? But you do not divide by the active listings. You divide by the items that were available. And the time that I hear this the most is when people are saying, hey, when you want to check a comp, you go into eBay, quickly on your phone, you look at how many items are for sale, and then you go and you do the filter and you do the items that sold, and you divide the items for sale divided by the items that sold, and that's going to give you a sell-through rate. It's not, because those items that sold were for sale. So you would have to take the items that sold and then add those to the items that are still for sale, and that would give you a more accurate, that would give you the sell-through rate. You would have to add the two together. Now, when you're out shopping and you're doing this quickly to take a quick guess, right? I do that. I'm like, oh, there was 100 available or 100 sold, and currently there's only like 3 available. Like that's going to be a quick turnover, right? But for the sake of exact math, you have to take the total available, and the items that sold were available during the time period that you're looking at. The second thing is going to be you divide the items by the items. To get your sell-through rate for the month, you divide the items that sold divided by the items that you listed for the month. That's going to completely inflate your numbers. That will give you a percentage that could be useful. That is what that is telling you. So if you divide, let's say you sold 25 items of the 100 items that you listed for the month. That's going to tell you of the new items that you listed, what percent of them sold that month, which is still useful information, but that's not your sell-through rate. That's how many items sold out of how many items that you listed. Your sell-through rate is out of how many items that you have for sale. So if you listed 100 for the month, but over the past, 2 years that you've been selling, you now have 300 active listings on eBay. Only 100 of those were listed for the month. The 300 is your active listings, and then you add that plus how many sold for the month. The third thing is going to be donating sale inventory will increase your sell-through rate. Now, while this is correct, right? So think about why this is correct. If you have 300 items for sale and you go through and you do a inventory, you go through and say, I've had this forever, I'm getting rid of it. You have 300 active items for sale. I'm going to show you the spreadsheet here. If you have 300 active items for sale, and you go through and you get rid of 50 of them. So let's do here. Let's say you have 100 items for sale. You go through and you get rid of 25 of them and say, those are bad. I'm going to get rid of them. This now goes down to 75. And yes, your sell-through rate goes up because this number, your denominator, is getting smaller. So it is going to increase your sell-through rate. However, so it's a true statement. However, it's not best practice. And it's not going to actually tell you how you're performing if things that aren't selling you're just getting rid of, right? I'm not saying it's bad practice. I'm not saying if you have items that aren't selling not to get rid of them. But when you are comparing items, if you get rid of 50 items and then next month you're like, oh, my sell-through rate's so much better now, it's not because you sold anymore. It's because you got rid of items, right? And so if you do this, maybe once a year, go through and do this and be mindful that that's what's happening, that you got rid of old items, make a note of it. If you are going in and doing this on a regular basis and getting rid of inventory that's not selling, you need to be looking at your business practices. If you are buying inventory, it's not selling, and you are just donating it back and getting rid of it, you're not making money, friends. And then the fourth thing is quantity sold is just as important. Quantity sold is just as an important, that's weird to say, variable, right? And we kind of talked about this at the beginning. There's no reason to look at sell-through rate. I sold 50 items this month. I sold 25 items last month. It's just as good. I can evaluate my business based off of how many items I'm selling. I don't need to know sell-through rate. We talked about this in depth in the beginning of the video, so I'm not going to go into it too much, but putting a sell-through rate allows you to look at it objectively and knowing how many items that you have available, right? It's not about how many that you sell. It's about how many of those that you sold. It's about how many of those that you have for sale are actually selling, right? So if you guys like this video, YouTube also thinks you'd like this video. I'll link a playlist down here of how to make money reselling. And then if you liked it, make sure to give it a like, a save, a comment, share it to other Facebook pages or other social media for other people to enjoy, and consider joining my memberships to support the channel.